There are a few topics in the last decade that are more worthy of the tinfoil than how COVID started. What was the origin of the virus that completely upended society and completely redefined our relationship with government and completely reshaped how we select that government? It fundamentally changed how we pick our leaders and the rules by which they lead, all to their benefit and power, of course. And we're just supposed to accept that as some sort of coincidence. Emergency times call for emergency responses, that's all. And generally, I do think it's wise to assume that the simplest answer is the correct one. The simple answer in this case being Chinese negligence, that this was nothing more than a reckless foreign government behaving recklessly, and we all paid the price for it. We did the best we could with an unknown, dangerous situation. But implied in doing our best is that there is a better to be done, and our leaders don't seem to grant that there is. If this was all just a series of mistakes, the question to ask is, why aren't we learning anything from the mistakes? Why do the same people who benefited very conveniently keep benefiting very conveniently? And if there appears to be some sort of intent in repeating these mistakes, how likely is it actually that the origin was a mistake? Now, of course, I'm not saying anything crazy like this lady made the virus or something like that. She only worships the guy who did. I'm just saying that this selection for new CDC director, same as the old CDC director, confirms we aren't interested in learning anything or reflecting on how we've compromised our founding philosophy of government. Instead, we are interested in committing to the redesign, making every absurdity of the last 3 years the permanent norm, not the isolated mistake. Biden's first CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, is resigning effective the end of the month after a tenure of lying about vaccine efficacy, abusing her agency with what would later be determined to be unconstitutional overreach in the eviction moratorium. Yes, that happened under Trump. Yes, it was also bad then. And yes, they both should have stopped it. Colluding with the teachers' unions to keep your kids out of school and mask them up if they couldn't, at the cost of your kids' educational and social development, all while telling you that you better comply or we'll all face impending doom.
I'm going to pause here. I'm going to lose the script, and I'm going to reflect on the recurring feeling I have of impending doom. Right now, I'm scared.
Do what I say or die. Whoopsie. Turns out that doing the opposite of what I said probably increased your chances of healthy survival, actually. If all of that was an error, we should get some reflection and a replacement intent on some corrections, but instead we're just going to get an apprentice of the exact same philosophy. Reportedly, Biden has selected Mandy Cohen, the former North Carolina health secretary, to replace Walensky as the head of the CDC starting in July. Her selection is not yet official, but it was first scooped by the Washington Post last week, and the Post's reasons for why Biden made this selection are important to consider. Firstly, Biden likes her management skills. She's a bureaucrat of bureaucrats. Nobody moves the suits like Mandy Cohen. If you need a quarterback for an entire team of government waste, Mandy Cohen is your signal caller. Plus, the team looks up to her. She has the right allies and fans, the Post says, including, yes, the patron saint of medical fascism himself, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who said he was personally quite impressed with her grasp of the situation and public health principles. No elaboration on those principles. One would assume something like, shut the hell up and do what I say and don't cross-reference it with what I said yesterday. I doubt Fauci was actually impressed with her principle grasping. It's much more likely he just appreciated the ego stroking of her Fauci mask, a gesture by which Mandy Cohen said masking isn't just effective, but it's fun too. It looks fun just like a padded cell, only if you're mentally ill. In a sane society, any association with, let alone the uncritical worship of, the architect of all of the worst COVID mistakes and injustices would be immediately disqualifying. Not only are you out for this job, but actually you're in for a Big Bird costume instead. But in this society, it's actually the strongest resume point somehow, because we aren't trying to learn from these mistakes at all. We're trying to normalize them until they are institutionalized instead of Mandy Cohen. She's a CDC insider, the Post says, and that's what makes her a great candidate. She's someone who can speak their language. Again, the idea being this is a language worth maintaining instead of something to correct or even dismantle. And of course, perhaps most importantly, other than the Fauci alliance, Cohen is really good at handling angry Republicans, which she demonstrated representing the Obama administration during the healthcare.gov Obamacare launch debacle. And she could repeat that with House Republicans now intent on CDC investigations. The reasoning here is explicit, so it's not like we have to make any guesses, but what's noticeable about those 20 paragraphs describing why Biden would pick this lady? Every reason provided is political. In fact, not one reason is scientific or medical in nature. The people demanding that you trust the science are picking the supposed scientists to trust based on politics alone. If this was all about the science, the political considerations would be irrelevant, yet they're primary, the sole focus of this article and the selection itself. And so too are the politics in Mandy Cohen's career, primary. She is a doctor in title only, just like Fauci is. She got her credentials decades ago, and she's spent the decades since in government offices, not in medical offices seeing patients. She became a physician in 2005 and worked at Massachusetts General Hospital for all of 3 years, before she took a management role at the VA, started a doctors' political organization to support Obama, and swung that into various bureaucratic jobs for Obama during his 2 terms. After that, she became the health secretary in North Carolina, and for the last year, she has been the CEO of a healthcare networking company. She wasn't selected for the science, because the science is hardly any part of her background. Her background is left-wing politics and the institutional administration of it. But don't listen to me tell you that the science has nothing to do with her philosophy. Listen to her. Here she is last spring at Duke University describing how she'd make public policy decisions, as in what's banned and what's okay, based on chit-chat with her girlfriends.
I'd say at the leadership level, right, my counterparts in other states, a lot of our sharing of knowledge really rested a lot on personal relationships. So I would call, probably the person I called most was the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Massachusetts. She worked for a Republican governor, but you know, when she was like, "Are you going to let them have professional football?" And I was really like, "Nope." And she's like, "Okay, neither are we." You know, it was like conversations like that. So, or I'd be like, "So when are you going to think about lightening up a mess?" They're like, "Next Monday." I'm like, "Okay, next Monday."
All right, great. So it's mom group politics, but instead we are all the kids. Of course, you can gather there that the only guiding principle was not the science. It was just the feelings of the clucking hens. But notice the subtleties too. If not the science, what was guiding these feelings? Well, first, it's politics, at least in part. Note she says they're unprompted. I'd call my friend. She works for a Republican, but that's okay. Well, if this is all about evidence-based decision-making, then why are political affiliations relevant at all? Second, she is openly saying that personal relationships are foremost, as in who she's friends with determines and justifies the rules that she makes for you. That's another way of saying I'm connected and you're not, so do what I say. And lastly, notice the submissiveness. She didn't have the courage to make these decisions because they were the right decisions. She needed the validation of her peers. She would do it if everyone else was doing it. That's not leadership. That's taking orders. So who's giving the orders? It's supposed to be you, but by her own description, it's definitely not you. The only positive thing you could say about that admission is that at least it was honest. But the trouble is, it was honest 2 years too late, and very conveniently after she had already left the government job that could have held her accountable for it. Because while she was still on the job, crafting and enforcing the typical arbitrary COVID nonsense, and while she was having these conversations with her best girlfriends to make these ridiculous rules, she was telling you that it was all scientifically determined.
Museums, aquariums, retail stores, barbershops, beauty salons can now have 100% of capacity. He said that was justified because of the science. Tell us what it was about that was kind of the tipping point.
Yeah, so our scientific team, in coordination with looking at recommendations for the Centers for Disease Control and others, and really understanding, again, what we have learned over this year about how does this virus spread.
It was literally mask on, mask off. Like many others, she put it on for the cameras, but offstage, she knew it was a bunch of bullshit. And don't get too excited thinking, well, at least I get to watch her squirm at her confirmation hearing trying to explain how her mom group got a bulk deal on Fauci masks. Not that that's particularly exciting or changes much regardless. No, that's not happening anyway. Because as is customary for the unaccountable CDC, there is no accountability for the appointment of the director. By law, it is not a Senate-confirmed position, at least for now. The last omnibus bill included a requirement for Senate confirmation starting in 2025, so Cohen would face the grilling if she stays for the next administration, but until then, it is governance by chick chat, at the sole discretion of the old man with the sandbag problem. But actually, that framing is a bit unfair, not to Mandy Cohen, who has excused herself of any fairness owed, but to ourselves, because to act like she has no accountability is actually to deny our own. In the last 3 years, the CDC has quickly and aggressively climbed the ranks of the most deletable federal agencies, but the truth is, we don't actually need that Herculean delete effort by law at all. We just need to stop listening to them. The CDC never sent a goon squad to rough anybody up. They rarely use the force of law themselves. The overwhelming reason the CDC was able to achieve and maintain its authority and power is because we allowed it, because we complied, because we lacked the courage to say no. And there's a lot of power that doesn't take much courage in doing that, especially with this lady who admits the power that it has over her. She admits that she caves to social pressure. She admits that she does what others think she should. She admits that she craves popular approval. So just invert that social pressure and approval. Easier said than done against DC power, with so many other institutions going right along with it. Your employer, your school, your church, I get it. But when one of us has the courage to say shut up, many more of us will have the courage to say shut up. And when a critical mass of us has the courage to say shut up, come and make us, this is not a lady who is going to come and make us. This is a lady who's going to call up her friends and gossip about how mean and stupid we are. Because when people say, F you no, she listens, by her own admission. So we'd be smart to at least give that a try. Her scientific team has confirmed it is likely even more effective than the Dr. Fauci mask, and way more fun, too. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Gab, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.